you go. Awesome. So, Madeline, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you today?
I'm doing good as well. Thank you. Thank you so much for asking. So, welcome to the show. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. It is super awesome to have someone as talented and badass as you, always.
Thank you.
So, before we start, I have to give you an epic welcome to the show. So,
I love that. That's fabulous. Thank you.
right. Now, starting with the whole interview now, tell me, where does your passion for acting started?
So, my first time seeing a show, I was in 4th grade.
Okay.
And I saw a community theater production of Footloose, and I don't think I blinked once. Like, it looked like so much fun.
Yeah.
And I remember leaving that show and telling my mom, like, I want to do that. Like, that's what I want to do. And so I did every community theater thing possible. I was also one of those kids who people would be like, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I had no idea. I was like, I don't know. Something. And I remember in 7th grade putting the pieces together, being like, oh, people do that for their job. And I was like, well, that's what I'm gonna do. And it just kept going from there, and here we are many years later.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what were some of the challenges that you had when you started?
Well, I was very, very lucky in that I grew up in a community that had a lot of theater opportunities. We had I was doing shows year round. I would say one of the biggest things, just as like even a preteen, the dealing with the disappointment was a big thing of, I remember I was in callbacks for Peter Pan, and I must have been like 12 or 13 and not getting to play Peter and being in the ensemble instead. And I remember being at home and just being so upset when I got the cast list, and we had rehearsal the next day. And my mom said, she was like, honey, you can quit if you don't want to do it. I know this is hard. And I was like, no, I'm doing it. And I remember going to rehearsal the next day and being like, I love doing theater. I'm going to do it. I can be disappointed and I can still show up. And I think learning that at a young age was so valuable, but also, it's hard to deal with those feelings when you're 12. And then those feelings don't really go away. Like, it's just kind of part of being in the business is learning to grieve the opportunities that you don't get, that you were so close to, and figuring out how do we keep going even when we have those experiences like every other week.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree on that. And also I think that one of the things that maybe they would need to teach us when we are little is that, like, how to understand failure, or how to come up with it, how to be like, okay, it didn't work the way that I wanted, but that's life. And I can understand that it gets super discouraged whenever you're following what makes you happy, and you don't have like that epic reaction that you would hope to get,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Now, talking about your performances on theater, so let's start with Crazy for You. So you played as Betsy. Tell me, was that like your first play? And what were some of the things that you enjoyed about that play?
So that was actually not my first play. That just happens to be the last thing on my resume. There are many shows that have not made it onto my resume because they just don't fit. That I did Crazy for You right before I graduated from college. I had a summer stock theater, and that summer was one of my favorite summers, and also absolutely insane. Like, we did 5 shows in 10 weeks, and in those 10 weeks, like, the amount of things that happened were just crazy. We went from we started with Call Me Madam, and I was the dance captain for that, and then we went into Singing in the Rain. I was dance captain for that, and then I was playing Cinderella in their children's show, and then on top of that, I was then cast as Velma in Chicago in our next show. So at one point, there was 1 week where I was performing Cinderella, dance captaining, and performing and singing in the rain, and learning Velma in Chicago. It was insane. And then they asked me to stay and do Bonnie and Clyde as well. So we did Chicago and then Crazy for You. And we did all original choreo for Crazy for You. And it was just, I love doing that show. It's so much fun. The choreo is just so joyful, and it just feels good in your body, or at least in my body. And I remember leaving the stage one night being like, why was I having trouble seeing? And realizing that I was smiling so much that my eyes were squinting, and so I couldn't fully see. So that show is just so lovely and wonderful. And then I stayed for to play Bonnie and Clyde, or Blanche and Bonnie and Clyde, and then I went and finished college. So it was, that summer was a whirlwind, but it was so much fun.
Yeah, I bet. How cool. And how usually you prepare before going on stage?
So it really depends on the show and who I'm playing. So like when I did Bonnie and Clyde, I really wasn't dancing in the show, so I would pretty much just like hum a little bit and be like, am I warm? Yep, we're good. And then Bonnie and Clyde, I was notorious for them calling places and like not having a wig on yet. Everything else would be done, but like it just wig cap. And so for a show like that where I'm not dancing, it's a little less demanding. But like using Chicago, for example, when I was playing Roxy, I would go to the theater an hour and a half before every show, and do like a warm-up, or sometimes I'll do yoga. I like to do something that doesn't take a lot of energy to do, but just like warms my body up. I'll normally do like a quick maximum 10-minute vocal warm-up. Again, I don't want to burn out my system before doing the show. And then I'm a big fan of meditation and like centering yourself. So I'll always do a quick meditation of just like bringing all parts of me back into myself, making sure that I'm present and ready to do the show, and that whatever else is happening in life doesn't interfere with me being able to do my job that day. So again, it depends on the show, but that's generally like my 3 things. And I always listen to good music. Every show ends up with like a different playlist that I'll put in. I'll be like, all right, it's time for the show. Gets me in that headspace for the show. And then we perform.
There you go. That's awesome. And what are some of the techniques or things that you usually do in order to prepare a character?
So a lot of it for me is about understanding the way that the character thinks, and like what are all of the motivations behind their actions. So like I've done Chicago a bunch of times, and me as Madeleine, I don't have experience killing somebody, but like understanding why my characters would do that, where that sense of desperation comes from. And I have an acting coach who talks a lot about front loading emotions. So getting in the practice of tuning into those feelings so that when it comes time for the show, you're so well practiced at getting into that you can just do it in a second if you need to. So a lot of the rehearsal process for me is about, one, just like learning the material, but then learning it's almost like the roller coaster, like building the roller coaster that character goes on throughout the show, so that when we open and we're performing, I can just ride the roller coaster. My body and my emotional system knows at least a blueprint of, at this point, these feelings start to come up and this is why. And I tend to be a very analytical, thinky person. So like getting all of that out of the way in rehearsals so that I'm not on stage thinking, because nobody wants to watch you sit and think. Like that's not as enjoyable as watching someone really live out an experience.
Totally.
So preparation for me is a lot about that thinking, so that then I can integrate it into my body and let it happen on stage.
Okay. And how you break character?
How do I what? Sorry.
Yeah, like once the show was over, how you break character and return to be you.
Yeah. So this is actually an acting technique that I work with my coach on. His name is Ken Schatz. He's absolutely wonderful. And he works with something called cooling out. So just like we amp ourselves into an emotion, we also have the power to bring ourselves out of that emotion, which when you're doing really dramatic shows or dealing with difficult content, I think that's just so crucial in maintaining mental wellness. I also run a business called the.energy.studio that's focused on mental and energetic wellness for performers, because I think this is so important and it's frequently missed in our training. So at the end of the night, especially if my character doesn't have a sense of catharsis in the show, I will give myself some time to just like do something silly and act myself into different feelings or a different way of thinking, to remind my system that it's safe for me to go to those places every night. And then honestly, after shows, I am typically very hungry. And so there's typically like some kind of meal after a show. And the meal will, I'm a very routine oriented person. So like each show tends to have a specific meal for afterwards. So yeah, so definitely like a cool out, getting myself together, and then going and having something to eat, refueling, because doing a 2-hour show can be very exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I bet. And now that you mentioned like the whole meal, tell me like, what is your go-to meal?
So my before show go-to meal is typically, I love that like chickpea pasta. So I have chickpea pasta with some salmon and some kind of green vegetable, and pesto. I just like mix it all in and eat that. That's typically what I eat before a show. And then I also normally have grapes at intermission.
And after?
After, again, it depends on the show. The last show I did, which was Chicago, my go-to afterwards was Taco Bell. So like very healthy. And other shows, it's like I don't know, like an apple and peanut butter or something. It just really depends on the show. But when I was doing Chicago, I was playing Roxy, and Roxy's on stage for at least an hour and a half of the show. So you use a lot of energy throughout that show. So Taco Bell was needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is interesting, right? Whenever you will get like this, like you will be that much tired, like Taco Bell or pizza or burgers or something like that, it pretty much gives you like all the energy to be like, okay, I'm back now. Yeah. You just gotta raise that blood sugar back up and then get some rest. Totally. Now, so you have been in many other plays, such as Christmas Carol, as you mentioned, Spamalot, White Christmas, Chicago, you mentioned too, Bonnie and Clyde. But tell me some of the highlight moments you had during those plays.
So my absolute all-time craziest story. So I've mentioned Chicago. I've played Velma in Chicago twice, and then this last time that I did Chicago, I was at Arkansas Rep. And this show, like I'll give you the shorter version because I could talk about this for 45 minutes. But I originally didn't book this show. Somebody pulled out last minute. So 2 weeks before, they called me and they're like, hey, we know it's short notice. Will you come and play June, who's one of the 6 Mary Murderesses, and then understudy Roxy and Velma? And I was like, okay, sure. So I went and I did that. We had our rehearsal process. And so the week before you perform or you start previews, you have tech week where you're just in these long hours of rehearsals. And we were in our second day of something called a 10 out of 12, which is 10 hours within a 12-hour block. We were 5 minutes from being done with that day. And the girl playing Roxy went to do something, but just like slipped on the stage and ended up breaking her foot. And like I saw it happen and I was like, she's gonna be fine. And then she couldn't stand on it and I was like, and I'm gonna go work on my lines. And so at I think it was like 1:30 in the morning, our stage manager knocked on my door and was like, hey, so you're gonna open the show as Roxy, and we have a show on Tuesday, which was in 48 hours. And he was like, what do you need? And I was like, you know, I actually think I'm okay. And I gave him a list of the things that like I didn't feel quite solid on. And I had worked with the stage manager before, thank God. So we already had a great relationship.
Yeah.
And then we go into rehearsal on Sunday. We have a full day of rehearsal, and I get home and I just like cannot move. I was like, my body was so tired. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, wow, I didn't think that playing Roxy was more physically demanding than playing June in the ensemble. And, like, my whole body hurts. And then at 6 a.m. I woke up and realized that I had the flu because somebody in the cast had the flu. So I luckily somebody in our cast was also a doctor. So I called her and I was like, I need you to prescribe Tamiflu, which I had never heard of, but she had talked about it because this other person had it. And so I called our stage manager and I was like, I need you to not freak out, but I definitely have the flu. Can you take me to go get Tamiflu? So, and this was before the pandemic, before masks. So what we ended up doing is they canceled our first preview. They made it into a staged reading concert version without Roxy. I was quarantined for 24 hours. And then our final rehearsals, we did the show with masks. And so there were also some silly things that happened in our run that we didn't, until 2 weeks later, we didn't really think about, but like we didn't hold hands at bows because we didn't want to spread the flu. And then like 2 weeks in, someone was like, why aren't we holding hands? And we're like, oh, I guess we could touch each other now. That's cool. But so we opened the show, we got incredible reviews. And there was one other cast member who caught it, and we had our own little quarantine dressing rooms in the scene shop. So I had a table saw as one of my counters and I just like put a plant on it. But so that experience was such a whirlwind, and like there was just so many things that happened in that like 3 days even. And then the girl who was playing Roxy ended up coming back a few weeks later. So there were 2 weeks of my life where I was exhausted, but having so much fun because I would wake up at like 4 to go and do news things for publicity. So I would go be on the news in the morning, sing a little ditty, talk to them about the show, come home, take a nap, go to understudy rehearsal for Velma, and then go back home, eat some dinner, and go perform Roxy, and then go to Taco Bell. So this was it was just so insane, and it was so much fun. And I'm also so grateful. I feel like I have to mention that there were so many people in that show who were so incredibly supportive of me, and like I could not have done it without them. Like the person who was understudying me, my friend Sydney, she met with me before rehearsals to go through different parts of the I just saw my sister jumped on. Hi. To go through different parts of the show. And she would bring me coffee, and our costume designer, the first day of rehearsals, was like, do you have food with you? And I was like, oh my God, I forgot that I have to eat. Like I was thinking about everything else and I forgot to eat. And so she brought me food, and like there were just so many people who did so many things to support me and also the show to make sure that it could happen. And so that's one of those memories that I will always treasure, of like the things that I was able to do, and it reminded me how much I'm capable of, but also seeing the way that other people came through and really supported the process and supported me, and it was just such a lovely experience. So that is my favorite memory.
That's so cool. So basically you were, I think that you were maybe like one of the first show with like one of those first shows with masks.
Oh yeah. I mean, and this was about a year before the pandemic, maybe 2 years. No, about a year before the pandemic. And so, I mean, we didn't wear them for performances, but for rehearsals, we wore them that whole week.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. That's epic. Like super hectic, but epic.
Oh yeah. There was so much adrenaline, like
just
insane amounts of adrenaline.
Yeah, I bet. And like how, like what do you usually do after a play? So you will go eat Taco Bell, and what after?
It really depends on what the next day looks like. If
Yeah.
like if I have to be up early and for something, then I'll just go home and go to bed, or like take a bath and go to bed. And there are other times where you just need more than that. Like you need to like go have a drink with friends or something to help yourself wind down. There are other shows, every show you develop like its own routine based on what you need. When I was doing White Christmas, the first time that I did it, my roommate was also in the show, and we used to go home and our routine was to watch Golden Girls while icing our feet and eating vanilla ice cream with peanut butter. Like it's whatever. We develop our own little weird routines.
Fair enough.
And that's what's part of what makes each show really special.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it gets like a different experience, like a different after experience, right?
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
So cool. That's so cool. Now, from all of the characters that you have played so far, what are some of your favorite ones, and which ones could describe parts of yourself?
I mean, some of my favorites, I loved playing Blanche in Bonnie and Clyde. I think her story is just so tragic. And that was the first time I really felt like I was acting and like was really consistent in my acting. I was very proud of that. I actually think that I was nominated for one of those like Broadway World Awards for that. So I loved Blanche. I love Roxy. I think she's just so complex, and but also that show is just so well written that it doesn't get old. I think those two are probably my favorites. I will do White Christmas 10,000 times and never be sick of it. I think it's one of the most beautiful, rewarding shows to do. And yeah, I would say out of what I've gotten to play, those are probably the ones that have been my favorites so far. And in terms of like what ones are like represent a part of me, I think part of what is so magical about theater is finding the humanity in each character. And I think the reason that we get cast in these different roles is because there's something about that character's humanity that we understand. So like if I have no idea how to have empathy and compassion and understand a character, it's going to be really hard for me to play that character. And so I think every role that I have gotten to play and been lucky enough to play is has parts of me, and sometimes it's parts of me that I don't express in my everyday life, or like want to be. Like I don't particularly want to be so angry at the world that I kill somebody. Like that's not something I want in my life. But I can understand that frustration that she had of my life isn't where I thought it would be. And so I think it's just such a wonderful thing to be able to find the humanity in all of these characters. And I think that's what makes shows interesting, is when we can see the humanity of somebody that we wouldn't necessarily side with all the time. And I actually just did I had somebody interview me for a blog post for the.energy.studio, which is my company, and that was one of the things that we talked about how it's so much harder to tune into the humanity of a character when you are not able to tune into your own humanity, and you aren't able to tune into who you are authentically. So
totally. And also I think, like the other day, I had this interview in which we were talking about the whole playing a character, and then at some point we were saying like maybe for some people would think like whenever you will play a character is like you will play pretend, but no, you have to be basically that person in order to kind of make it relatable for the audience, you know?
Yeah, and I think there's a fine line between I am that character and I am highlighting elements of emotions and experiences that I understand to portray that character. Because I think there is a fine line, and honestly like a danger when we start to identify as somebody that we are not. And this is part of why I do this cool out whenever I finish doing a show that's particularly emotional, because I need to remind my system that I don't have to live in those feelings all the time. I don't have to carry them with me. I am allowed to have a life outside of my work, because I find that this is something that takes time to learn when you've been doing theater most of your life, that at a certain point we learn to identify as a human, and then a human who acts, and a human who does this for work, as opposed to all that I am as an actor, all that I am as a performer. No, we have lives outside of that. And I think it's really important for actors to honor that, because if not, then it gets into all these different mind things that I don't believe are healthy. Yeah,
totally. Now, what would you say it's an important aspect for storytelling for a play?
I think honoring the story above the actors per se. And I don't mean like above the safety of the actors, but I mean that it's not about a star, or it's not about highlighting the talents of the actor. It's about highlighting the story, and in highlighting the story and the important elements of the story, we see the brilliance of the actors. And I think that there are shows like Funny Girls coming back to Broadway, and that show very much is a star vehicle. And so it's part of it is about knowing what your role in the show is. Like, this is on my mind because I was in callbacks for it, and so being in callbacks for the ensemble, honoring that this show is about featuring Fanny Bryce, right? It's about telling her story, not about telling the story of the ensemble. Whereas if you were in a show like Come From Away, that's about telling the story of the ensemble. It's not about highlighting the story of one individual. So I think being clear about what is the story and what purpose are you on stage for? What is your role in the storytelling?
There you go. And like from all of your different performances, which one has been like the deepest learning curve? I mean, like the performance you learned the most lessons from?
Oh, there are a few. There are three that pop to mind immediately. One was my first professional show. I was 19. I did White Christmas, and I was absolutely terrified. I worked so hard on that show, and I had to learn not to take things personally. I remember I was cut from a section of a dance, and I was so upset, and it honestly took me years to be like, oh, that wasn't personal. Like, it had to do more with the whole image of what the dance needed to be, not about you. And so that was a big lesson, that like when you are putting on a show, it's not about you, it's about the production as a whole. And so like letting your ego go, which can be difficult. And then I was going to mention Bonnie and Clyde. That one just is sticking out to me. That was the first time I felt like I really had to be vulnerable on stage and learn that that's safe, that it's safe to be that vulnerable. And I mean, she has this beautiful moment at the end of the show where her husband dies in her arms, very Les Mis moment. And she just completely breaks down. And I remember doing that every night and leaving and being like, wow, it actually feels really good to open up in that way on stage and to share that moment with people and to feel the energy in the theater shift. So that was a big moment. And then doing Roxy in Chicago was, that show really taught me that I'm really hard on myself, and that I am much more capable than I give myself credit for sometimes, and that when you have to do it, you figure out how to do it. So that show, I think, really just reminded me of my own abilities and my own power to like do the things that I needed to do.
Okay. And if you could describe your career at the moment in a play, what would be the title of it?
Oh gosh. This is such a hard question. Well, my career right now would be called auditioning.
Yeah.
Because right now we're just in auditions. We're doing,
Totally,
we're getting back into things. And things are opening up, which is just so wonderful. I'm in a wonderfully unique place in my career right now where I am, at least I feel this way, that I am in a transition period where I am now getting called in for bigger projects. Yeah. And so with that, there are fewer job offerings, which just requires a lot of patience and trust that things are happening and things are moving in the right way. But there are only so many jobs on Broadway. There are only so many national tours. And the fact that I'm even in those rooms is really wonderful. And just trusting the process and that, you know, I'm getting called in for a reason. These things are happening for a reason. And maybe the show would be called Patience. I think that's what the show would be called. It would be called Patience and Trust.
Patience and Trust, okay.
Yeah, and lots of, again, I'm going to go back to support, like finding the support of the people who, when you are having a hard day, because they're going to happen as a performer, knowing who you can lean on and who's going to say like, hey, I hear those minions that are speaking in your brain. I call them the mind minions, and reminding you not to trust them, reminding you that you are not bad, you are not wrong, you are not cut out for this, that all of those thoughts that every single performer has, even I have friends who have been in multiple Broadway shows and they still have those thoughts. Finding your people and the team of people who are going to remind you that those thoughts are not true, they are fears, and that it is worth continuing doing what you're doing, because what you're doing is important in the world, and you wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't important. So,
totally. Yeah, I like that. Patience and trust. I like that. Yeah, good. You know, you could make like your own trilogy. So that would be like the first part, and then later on we can make like another one in, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years. You know, like sequel and see.
Yeah, I love it. Let's do it.
You go. You already have your own cinematic universe now. There we go.
Yeah, as long as I'm the one who books my own role.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Makes total sense. Yeah. Now let's talk about like the musicals. So some of those plays are musicals, of course, such as Chicago, Hairspray, Bonnie and Clyde. So I mean, and like pretty much all of them. But tell me how you usually prepare before a musical.
Well, most of what I do is musicals. I've done a few straight plays here and there, but I always find that when I'm doing them, I really miss the music. And so, I mean, it's pretty much the same for every process of, I'm someone who likes to go into rehearsal very prepared. I like to be as off book as I can be, so that the rehearsal isn't about me learning, but about me exploring the character and what I'm doing in the show. So there's a lot of time spent outside of rehearsal for me. I know some people don't work that way, but that's just how I can walk into rehearsal feeling confident and knowing that I can do my best. So a lot of it is memorizing and learning and practicing outside of rehearsal so that I can show up and just really collaborate. And then a lot of it is just taking really good care of my body. When you're in a rehearsal process, it can be very, very demanding on your body, because when you're doing the show, you're going through those movements maybe twice a day. When you're in rehearsal, you're spending up to 4 hours doing the same movements over and over and over again. And so making sure that you're eating well and making sure that you are taking care of your body and stretching and cross training and working out, it really becomes a full-time job to make sure that you're, the only word I can think of is your instrument. And I feel like that's so, I don't know, hoity-toity, and so I don't love it, but like your body really is your instrument. And so making sure that you're taking care of yourself so that you can show up for work, and then knowing what are my limits, like can I afford to go and have a few drinks with friends, or do I need to actually just prioritize my work first? Because, you know, unlike bankers, we can't really show up to our jobs feeling like garbage and do particularly well.
Cool. And if you could describe your career, but in a musical, what would be the title of it?
So the first musical that comes to mind is 42nd Street, because that story is very much what happened in the saga that I told you of Chicago, of the lead getting injured and going in last minute and all those things. And that has happened to me. I've understudied a lot in my career so far. And so like going on last minute, and I've gotten to swing a few shows, which means that I know multiple tracks in the show. And so if somebody in the ensemble calls out, I go in for them. Yeah. So a lot of my career so far has been knowing shows very well and knowing multiple roles in the shows very well and being able to hop into them at any given moment, which is exciting and fun. Also slightly stressful at times, but
totally.
What isn't stressful, right?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, totally. And like I wonder, like what motivates you, like to keep up building your career? So while I was doing like the whole research for this interview and everything, I mean, basically you put like so much passion on it, and I mean, you're basically like a pro. I mean, also on your Instagram, we can see some of your, like kind of rehearsing too, and your resume. I mean, but basically you are killing it. But I wonder, like, what motivates you every day to wake up and to be like, let's continue, and even and also, like, whenever you have like those bad days that we all have, like, what makes you to kind of get out of it and just to continue?
Well, first of all, thank you for all the compliments. You know, it really ebbs and flows. And it would be so great for me to be able to be like, I never have a bad day. I'm always motivated. And I always love what I do, but that's just like really not true. I really think that theater is important in the world. I think that it's a really wonderful way to learn and to learn empathy and to do it in a fun way. I once heard somebody say that you can't be afraid when you're laughing. And so going with that, like, I think musicals specifically have a really wonderful way of telling important messages and important stories and also making you laugh. And I think laughter is very healing. And, you know, going to the question of how do I pull myself out of it? So I run a business called the.energy.studio that I formed because of this, because I recognize that we aren't taught how to do that. I went to an arts high school. I have a degree in musical theater from a great university. And those programs, at least when I was there, teach you how to perform and how to be part of the show process and how to audition. But they don't really teach you how to take care of yourself mentally. And I think part of that is because people haven't really talked about it. For a long time, there was this stigma around talking about those things, but now that mental health is much more mainstream, we're starting to talk about it. So I started this company that's focused on mental and energetic wellness for performers because I really burnt out. I was not taking care of myself. I was not taking care of my body. I got really sick. And then I found energy healing and learning to work with my own energy. And I started developing tools for myself of meditating, checking in with my energy and honoring my energy instead of trying to go against it and saying like, I understand that you're tired today, but you can't be tired today. We're just going to plow through. Like, learning how do I show up for myself instead of just showing up for the audition or showing up for the show. And so a lot of those tools are what help me pull myself out of it. I'm very disciplined about having a morning routine. I know that, like, I have many days, I had some last week, where I'll wake up and be like, I want to just stay in bed, I'm exhausted. And this is specific, especially the days where, like, I don't have theater things planned. Like if I don't have an audition that week, or I don't have a self-tape to record, and it's like, okay, I've spent so much of my life working on this and like I'm not doing it right now. And that's frustrating and that can be hard. And I know that when I get up, when I make my bed, when I wash my face, when I take some time to journal, when I meditate, when I do those things, it sets my energy and my mental state in a different place that allows me to show up for whatever is going to happen that day. Instead of getting stuck in the I want to stay in bed energy. So those practices really help me, and that's part of what I teach with my company now, because I think it's really important. And then also leaning on friends and like having friends who understand this industry, and friends who motivate you, and friends who are working so that it's close, so that you can see that it's possible. It's not some like distant, far off thing. So I think just surrounding yourself with supportive people is also so important, and people who you can say to, you know, I'm really bummed that this didn't happen, or I'm having a hard day, and they know how to support you in that. I think that's really important.
Preach.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you speak the truth here, but it is true. Yeah, totally true. At the end of the day, yeah, we all have like those days, but the important thing is to find a way, right, to just get out of it. Otherwise, if you're gonna stick with those minions that you just said, it's horrible. you know, if you stay with them, it's just horrible, and whenever you feel, and it can make you feel worse. That whenever you ask, I can't feel worse. No, you can, and a lot worse. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, well, and I think too, it's important to mention, like, we want to make sure that we honor what's happening. So I'm not a fan of being like, nope, that's not a thing in my life. I'm not, I don't actually feel these things. But saying like, okay, I recognize that I feel these things, and I am going to do things to help me feel better, instead of saying I don't feel these things. Because I think that's not efficient. When we just push things down, eventually Pandora's box opens, and we don't want that. We want to be able to honor and say like, okay, I'm feeling this way today. Why am I feeling that way? Is there something I can do to support myself? Something I do, I go to the gym. Like when I'm really stuck in those things, I'm like, okay, I just need to move my body. I just need to like not be in my apartment. I need to move my body. But I think there's a fine line between suppressing the feelings and honoring that they're there, and finding ways to help yourself through them and over them, instead of just pretending they don't exist.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Madeleine, what can I say? I mean, you're basically epic here. I would say that you're a badass person. You're a badass here. The fact that you are putting like so much passion on it, and that you're working on it, and that you have been through a lot. At the end of the day, that's super impressive, and I think that is also badass. So congratulations on being a badass. Also, because we finished the questions, I need to give you an epic shout out. So here we go. That's it. And I mean, you are a true rock star here. I mean, at the end of the day, those who are tuning in right now, make sure that you're following Madeleine like super now. If you're listening to this later on the podcast or watching this later on the YouTube, make sure that first of all, you leave a like on this video for sure. Then hydrate, and then follow Madeleine. Leave 1 million likes here and there. Share all her content. Make sure that spread the word that we have like a talented actor around here, and then come back to watch another video. And again, Madeleine, I mean, thank you so much. At the end of the day, I'm super sure that you like a lot of amazing things are in the future right now for you, and a lot of epicness, and
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on the live, the podcast, the YouTube, all the things that you do.
We cover everything, and soon SoundCloud, but I'm still working on that. But now before I send you off, I need to send you off in an epic way again. So here we go.
I love it. Thank you.
You deserve that and a lot more. So keep having an amazing rest of the day, an amazing upcoming weekend, an amazing upcoming week after this one, and be awesome.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.